Worsening tensions between the world's two top economies. Can they find common ground in the near future? My interview with former U.S. ambassador to China, Max Baucus. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Relations between the world's two largest economies are down the pits as COVID-19 goes on ravaging communities worldwide. U.S. President Donald Trump insistently blamed the pandemic on China, a strain on the relations, of course. Also, the U.S. has kept Huawei in its crosshairs. It seems everywhere you turn, ties between China and the U.S. are in a sorry state. Many say they have hit a new low in their relationship since diplomatic ties were made 4 decades ago. So, is a zero-sum mentality and policy the trouble? Can both sides get past it eventually and reach a common ground? Earlier, I talked to Max Baucus, who was a U.S. Senator for nearly 36 years, making him the longest-serving senator in Montana history. He's also the 11th U.S. ambassador to China, a role he held from 2014 to 2017. With his decades of experience in the U.S. political arena and his past communication with China, what is his assessment of the current bilateral ties? Let's listen to his words. What do you think could be the worst scenario as we go toward the presidential election in your country?
It's possible, although I think unlikely, that the United States government will ratchet up even more pressure against China. President Trump has already revoked the special status for Hong Kong, and also is working toward potential additional sanctions on Chinese officials with respect to alleged human rights violations in Xinjiang, as well as violations in Hong Kong. Then after that, there's restrictions on Huawei and companies who are selling products to Huawei and Huawei suppliers. So it could get worse. I think it's unlikely, though, because if it goes too far, then it's going to make it very difficult for normalcy to recur after the election. It's possible there'll be more sanctions, more action is taken, and similar to what the UK did just today or yesterday, namely banning of Huawei entirely from 5G in UK. So it could get a little worse, but I don't think a lot worse.
The National Security Advisor and Deputy National Security Advisor are in the European capitals trying to persuade their European counterparts to ban Huawei and ban Chinese tech companies and not to have further interactions. That's really what the U.S. is trying to exert its power over the others. Will that also happen in other parts of the world?
I don't think it'll happen much more. Currently, the countries which are banning 5G are so-called Five Eyes. Yes. That is, United States, Australia, New Zealand, UK, maybe Canada. And that's because they join in a security network, a cyber network together, and it's almost working together as one. Other countries are not part of that Five Eyes. Germany is not. France is not. Other European countries are not. And certainly other countries in Africa and Asia, Middle East are not. So this could be the high mark of Huawei being banned from 5G, for example, although there'll be intense pressure on other non-5G, non-Five Eyes countries. So we'll see.
We have noticed that now in the U.S. society, even some people trying to spread the conspiracy that 5G could contain coronavirus. That when you have a app trying to do the tracking of coronavirus spread, that app could have conspiracy theories involved. How would China be able to persuade the American people?
Well, I think the United States has been way too hypercritical in its criticism of China. As you say, sometimes without any proof whatsoever. This is a political season in the United States. President Trump running for re-election, members of the Senate and Congress running for re-election, and they're using China as a scapegoat, as a whipping boy to help them get elected. It's very easy to criticize. It's very hard to be more constructive. But I do think, frankly, that we are reaching obviously a very low point in the relationship, and the only solution out of this thing is for both countries to be much more transparent, put everything on the table. It'll take a long time, but slowly but surely, if there's good faith, there has to be good faith on both sides, and that'll help a little bit.
However, if you look at the reality that the current administration is trying to decouple, quote unquote, from China ASAP, as long as it serves its political agenda for the election. So do you think a mechanism, as you just mentioned, could really be established? If that mechanism cannot be established on time and in emergency, how will they be able to save this already ever-dwindling relationship, though very crucial?
Well, nothing can be done before the election. The situation is just too toxic. It's just impossible to have any meaningful action before the elections in the United States. Then after the United States, frankly, it's going to take a very solid administration, whether it's Trump or Biden, to say, okay, we've got to deal with China. We have to deal with it as grown-ups, as adults. China's not going anywhere. China's always going to be there. China is growing, it's strong. We have to find a way to accommodate China. Not in this superficial sense, not in a subservient sense, but to deal with China in a realistic sense, where we both self-respect each other. And we have to start setting lines, which we describe privately to each other, not publicly. We're way too public in our criticism of China. And frankly, I kind of respect some of the Chinese muted statements about the United States. They're less critical, they have fewer barbs in them compared with say, Pompeo or Trump criticisms of China. So it's just a lot of hard work, and it's like life. Nothing's easy. If you have good faith, the other side has good faith, you can get somewhere.
Chinese State Councilor Foreign Minister Wang Yi proposed 3 possibilities. One is things that the U.S. and China can cooperate on. Second, U.S. and China can dialogue about. Third, U.S. and China can manage and control the risks, about 3 categories of things. And he suggests to put all the issues between China and the United States to these 3 columns, so that the 2 sides will be having a clearer mind and not to mix everything together and come up with the solutions to every one of them. From your perspective, what is the way to control the damage?
Well, I think Wang Yi, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, is a good idea. I know him. He's a very reasonable person. I always like working with him. It's a very good approach. And I think if he continues with that approach, continues suggesting that approach, and also if the Chinese government is a little more transparent, it is explaining in more detail what it's doing and showing that it wants to work. For example, if it were to back off and not ram trawlers in the South China Sea, if it would work with the Philippines, work with Vietnam, work with Brunei, work with the other claimants in the area, that would help a lot. And also with respect to cyber, show that, say, Huawei or ZTE or other Chinese companies, the technology and the software is there for everybody to see, and the Chinese government and the companies will work with Western countries, including Great Britain and the United States, so those countries understand that those countries need not worry about espionage in their countries. But they have to show. China has to show, not just say, just has to show and lay open source software, for example, transparency, invite people over to China to see the company and see the software, and some mechanisms to show that if there's a difference of opinion, if there's a controversy, that there's a system set up to work out the differences.
Yeah, on some of the points you just mentioned, may I provide more information? Huawei, for example, even a few months ago already suggested by its founder, Ren Zhengfei, that Huawei is willing to open its system. Another piece of information you might be informed, just during the exercises in the South China Sea China has, State Councilor Foreign Minister Wang Yi also talked to the Foreign Minister of the Philippines, in fact, just yesterday. So it seems that many of the fronts that you've been trying to suggest, China has already been trying to cover in terms of transparency. Having said that, though, Mr. Ambassador, if I could turn the table and ask you whether U.S. has shown its transparency and whether U.S. is willing to work with China at all, or already see China as the opponent, and no matter what one party, for example, China does, it will always fall into whatever category the U.S. designed as the enemy.
Well, it's a very good question. In fact, former Mr. Wang Yi made that very point, I think, maybe today or yesterday, and I think he's accurate. It seems like any action China takes in the U.S. is immediately suspect. Too many Americans, especially in this administration, just to turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to any effort to try to work out some accommodation. So today, I think that the atmosphere in Washington, D.C. is totally toxic. And it's Republicans and Democrats both. It's very toxic. Well, to answer your question really depends on what we see after the elections. Full disclosure, I'm supporting Joe Biden. And if he is elected president, my judgment is that it'll be less toxic. It'll be less heated in its rhetoric and criticism of China. It'll be more rational. Now, still, China is a big foreign power. It's a rising country. The Americans are concerned about China. And so China's, in that new atmosphere, it's going to have to show it is being more transparent. You suggested about Huawei showing us no open door. That's great. There has to be more of that. And if there is more of that, you'll see that the attitude in the United States, especially after the election, and most especially if Biden's elected, will be more willing to listen to factual presentations by China. But again, I go back to deeds. It's actions that count even more than words. Both sides. But we have to work on that.
Right. Another thing, Mr. Ambassador, I know when you were in China, you were extremely passionate about that. And also, even you retired from the ambassadorial position, you also have been working consistently, even with your family members, on that. That is, the people-to-people exchanges and relations between China and the United States. You traveled most of the provinces in China. But, Mr. Ambassador, I am afraid I have to report to you the very fabric of that most important relation between China and the United States now is being damaged because of an earlier order coming from the current administration about punishing international students. 30% of them could be Chinese students. Though they rescind their decision, but the soup is already becoming spoiled.
It's true. I have to correct you a little bit. I did travel. I did go to every single province.
Okay, good for you, sir.
Yeah, and I loved it. It was a great job because I really like the Chinese people, and the reward of working on the relationship U.S.-China to help get it right was wonderful. It was a great reward. But fortunately, the administration did rescind that decision about online courses in U.S. universities, and therefore it's not as draconian toward Chinese students as before. But part of the problem, too, is not very many Americans have been to China. Americans really don't understand China. I wonder how much time Secretary of State Pompeo was personally spent in China other than his official capacity. U.S. officials do not know China very well. They've not spent much time in China at all. The only ones that have are the people in the think tanks, the academics. They've been to China time to time. But too few members of Congress, too few members of the United States government have been to China. You got to go to see, taste it, smell it, feel it, understand what it is, and then realize that Chinese people are very similar to American people, have the same hopes and desires. They want to have food on the table, take care of their kids, good education for their kids, decent health care, decent, air and water not polluted. We're basically the same. That's a huge issue. Americans just do not understand and know China. And if they were, they'd feel more comfortable with China and realize they can start working with China.
How do you think there can still be efforts made to repair or to mend the fabric of people-to-people relations? Many are disheartened by the series of actions recently the current administration took towards China.
Well, at lots of levels. For example, this is not people to people, but what if, for example, President Biden were to go to China and to spend some time going around China, not just to meet with President Xi and Zhongnanhai, but to go around the country, and go to various provinces and have stinky tofu with Chinese. I mean, just show that he's a real person.
You even designed the menu for him already.
that would go a long way. That would help a lot, Frank.
Putting jokes aside, Mr. Ambassador, from now until the new president, or the same president in the new term, coming into the office, we still have almost half a year to go. A lot of things could happen within this half year. So while China is trying to learn how to deal with the situation, many wonder whether the U.S. system will be able to work out some contingency plans to prevent the worst case scenario.
Well, you're alluding to a very good point, which is in the United States with elections every 2 years, presidential elections every 4 years, and a free media that can write and print most anything wants to say, the internet, exchange any idea anybody wants to exchange. That is the public opinion is very, very strong and influences congressional elections in a very significant way. Add to that is with the internet and social media, we're at a new era now where facts matter a little bit less, and emotion and drama matter more, and that's what excites people. So it's very difficult in a democracy to keep focused, keep your eye on the ball. In this case, the eye on the ball is on the relationship U.S.-China, and not getting wrapped up in incorrect, emotional information, but rather focus much more on the facts, on which intend to encourage trust. It's hard. It's very hard. And whoever's president, whoever's elected president in November, it's going to have an extremely difficult time dealing with all of that, because there will be forces in the U.S. on the other side, Republicans, if the Democrats president, or Democrats if the Republican president, who will politically try to damage that president. And they'll be very vocal about it. They're very open about it. It'll be in the media. And it's a question. Now, on America, I feel that there's deep intrinsic value in U.S. values, in goodwill, and efforts to find solutions to problems. So we'll work it out, but it's going to be difficult.
For the pandemic, COVID-19, in the United States, we see quite a concerning situation in the West and also the southern part of the U.S., and it's in quite a contract, let's just say, even with your northern neighbor, Canada. So, Mr. Ambassador, what do you make of the performance of the current administration regarding the fight against the pandemic?
The United States has done a poor job, I think, for several reasons. One, the United States did not have in place a good public health system to deal with national emergencies and pandemics like this. Second, I think that President Trump pushed too hard to open up the country rather than keep warning people to stay home, wear masks, keep the social distancing. And he was not a true wartime leader rallying the country against this war, against a war against this disease, this enemy, which is COVID-19. We've done a miserable job. It's very unfortunate. I think President Trump has roundly failed the test of leadership for not getting a better control over the disease. President Xi, China did a good job. Western countries tend to have a harder time because there's so many pressures within that push the leader to do things that maybe the leader should not do. But in this case, I think even so, I think President Trump did not do a good job.
We hope things are getting better soon with the prevention and control. Once the United States, as the biggest economy in the world, could be doing better, the rest of the world's economy and also the interactions could also speed up as a result. For now, I want to thank you, Ambassador Max Baucus, for you and your service to your country, and certainly to promote the exchanges between China and the United States. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Tian Wei. You do an excellent job in the same vein, trying to promote understanding between our two countries. You're a true servant in your own right.
Thank you, sir. Max Baucus, former U.S. ambassador to China. All the best and be well, you and your family. Ambassador Max Baucus, former U.S. ambassador to China. That's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search our program, World Insight, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.